Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Health meeting. My name is Thomas Corey. Stephanie Perry is with us on the call. Tess Curran, the agent of the board. We're awaiting Dr. Gagliardi's arrival, and Faust Fiore is here. Faust, I don't know your official title.
I'm the Director of Minimum Housing.
Okay. Pursuant to the open meeting law, any person may make an audio or video recording of this public meeting or may transmit the meeting through any medium. Attendees are therefore advised that such recordings or transmissions are being made, whether perceived or unperceived by those present, and are deemed acknowledged and permissible. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the February 20th. Unfortunately, we cannot approve those today because Stephanie was not present at the meeting and Dr. Gagliardi isn't present now. That'll have to be moved to the next meeting. Next is the discussion regarding the need for updating keeping of animal regulation with Faust Fiore, the Inspectional Services Division of the city. Mr. Fiore, if you would.
Okay, so I'm just going to review some of our concerns and regarding this ordinance. I might skip back a little bit in between examples and general stuff, but one of the reasons these concerns came up is that we have had instances where there's been a rooster kept, and we've been doing our best to prevail upon the owner of the rooster to get rid of the rooster. But when you look at the ordinance, it's a little bit unclear. Now, my understanding is that if a property doesn't have the correct setbacks, then they must come to someone who wishes to keep chickens must come to the board for a variance. And
that's correct.
Generally, they would be told that they can't keep a rooster and that they have to have rodent control. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so one of the case came up. I guess what we found documented was minutes of a meeting, but not a written variance that says you can't keep the rooster. Even if we could establish that, there's no real penalty. We've had neighbors threaten to come in the dead of night and purloin the rooster. That's not really conducive to civic order, but we're somewhat powerless to solve that problem. It seems like the will of the board has always been that you can't keep a rooster, but there are other properties that don't need the variance, and so that's not addressed. It's not in the ordinance itself. It's never addressed by the board because the board does not address those cases. And the same with rodent control. If a property doesn't need the variance, they don't need rodent control. Yet we might get a complaint about rodents that, not that we can definitively trace that to the people keeping chickens, but it seems to be, and in the minds of some of the residents we talked to, an inconsistency. So there are several ordinances that minimum housing or sanitation inspectors enforce, and there are fines attached to that. And I did see in this draft ordinance that's mentioned, but there's no fine. So it's just a difficult situation to enforce fairly and evenly. And I think that's sort of a general statement. But another issue that's come up, if it's a variance granted, unlike when you have the setbacks already, when you have enough property for the setbacks, it doesn't appear that those setbacks are required, whatever is possible, on those properties that are issued a variance. In other words, they can put their chicken coop right on the fence, which prompts complaints from neighbors, whereas someone who has a bigger yard, I guess, would keep that setback. So that's another inconsistency. So you have situations where there's a coop, it's on the property line, the neighbors are directly affected, but there's no it's not necessarily rodent control, or it's not the same as someone else who would have to keep that coop in the middle of their yard. You know what I'm saying? It's not
Yeah.
this, it doesn't seem to be an equitable situation across the board. So we have complaints that we can't really address. And the biggest one though is about the roosters themselves. How do we enforce against a property owner that has been told verbally, we assume, that they can't have a rooster, but we don't have it either in an ordinance or in a written variance that they can't have a rooster? And what do we do to enforce it? Can we fine them, or should we fine them? That's of course the will of the board, but those are the kinds of issues that we've been seeing. One other issue, and it is addressed, it seems to be addressed in this draft ordinance, is that we don't know if someone's been limited. How many hens can you have? So a variance might have been granted. We don't know. We can't find in some cases, at least, and maybe we don't know where to look. They start out with 4 hens, and sometime later now they have 24 hens. Was that the original will of the Board of Health? Does it matter how big their property is or where it is? So, flocks grow, and then sometimes they grow. And one of the things that happens is you get more chickens. You don't know if they're roosters or hens. When they're babies, you have the roosters. You don't want to get rid of the roosters. But that's another issue that has happened from time to time, where I guess the neighbors thought 4 hens was okay. Now the neighbors don't think 24 hens is okay. Does that make a difference? And would that make a difference if there was no rodent control because there was no variance? So I know that's a little convoluted, but that's sort of an amalgamation of different complaints that we've gotten. These are not all unique. Some of them, the neighbors may have, may complain about 2 of those items, but that's generally sort of the roundup here. I believe where we've been unable to satisfy people, and it's partly because there's a general, sometimes there's a knowledge out there of what other people can and cannot do, but it doesn't seem to be consistent. So those are the 2 issues really. How do we enforce, and how do we explain to people, which is not as much of a problem. We're an enforcement entity, but there is that feedback we get out there that things are unfair. So those are the kinds of issues we're hoping that the board can address whichever way they'd like.
And I just wanted to add that based on my conversations with Faust and Lisa and Roger as well, that it appears that more folks in the community are showing an interest in having chickens on the property and owning chickens, and that the regulation that we have in place right now it looks like put into place in 2000, and now with the popularity of having chickens and owning your own chickens, that it seems like because of the increase, it may be time for the board to consider making that update based on the increase that we're seeing.
Okay, that makes some degree of sense. I know in the past, whenever the board granted a variance, it was the policy to set the number of chickens. And I remember Dr. Weed or Dr. Souza would always ask, now you're not going to have all these chicks for Easter, are you? And keep them. And we would set the rodent contract. And in only one occasion do I ever remember we allowed roosters, and that was for a conjugal visit twice a year, because they were very special roosters of some kind.
That's very compassionate.
No, this was a gentleman up north, and Mr. Casavant did the inspection, and he was the one who came back and said the place was immaculate. It met all the specs. And because these were very special roosters, we allowed, again, conjugal visits twice a year for like 7 days at a time. But I would be in favor of updating the regulations with what we have here proposed.
there's one, if I may, there's one sort of technical issue that we have. When we get a check, generally, the standard operating procedure here in the city is to deposit that check right away. There is a bit of an issue if we have a variance, an application for a variance that's denied. And what we have is a license fee. And we have talked about what does that mean? In other words, if you pay that fee and then your variance is denied, do you get that $100 back? That would require a refund. It's a little bit cumbersome. I think as everyone knows, making payments through the city. We kicked around the idea of maybe there would be an application fee and then a license fee. And it could have $5, for instance, that's non-refundable. And then the balance of that $100, $75, would be due upon approval by the board. It's just kind of a technical problem where we collect the money. So Lisa will collect a check for $100. We're really not supposed to hold them. And this could be, what, 2 or 3 weeks. And they'd wait for a while. The applicants would wait for a while. We wonder if you consider we're just not sure what it means, a license fee. Is it an application fee? Is it non-refundable? Doesn't seem that way, but maybe there could be some way that we don't have to, Lisa doesn't have to hold on to a check for 3 weeks on her desk, because we're really not supposed to do that, but we don't have to then issue a refund. I don't know what the process is. There have been times when you've tabled an application and it's been taken longer to make a decision. We have application fees in the city just to apply for building permit. You pay an application fee. So something like that might be considered. I would consider that a relatively minor case here. But does the board mean this to be an application fee or a license fee? Should we not collect it at all until approval? We just want some guidance. We've had a past practice of collecting the whole $100. So I don't know if that's something the board wants to consider. You could have an application fee of $25 and a license fee of $100.
I think we could think about possibly, or the board could consider doing once a permit, to allow for a permit to be provided, the payment would be needed
Right.
in order to have a permit. So if we kind of go with a permit route for all chickens, on an annual basis, and then once the permit is provided, or in order to get the permit in hand to have chickens on your property, then that could be the opportunity where a resident would then pay.
Yeah, so it's granted
inspection
pending the payment of the fee. That's probably the cleanest way to do it.
Yes, with approval, yes, I would say with approval from meeting the requirements of the board. And then based on that approval, you would give them a permit and then they would pay for the permit.
That sounds logical.
Okay, so that kind of brings to mind, I don't know if I was clear, that say someone comes, well, we discover someone with chickens. So Lisa from time to time will discover someone who's got chickens. And they don't have the setbacks, so they have to go before the board. And they have the chickens all this time. And then the board says, no, you're not getting the variance. And they don't want to get rid of the chickens. So that's one of the reasons I think that some penalty should be paid. Even if, I don't know, I think it has to be a monetary penalty, but this comes out mostly with roosters. We have people who are hanging on to their roosters. They're, maybe they consider them more pets than anything. And, but I don't know, we don't know if that's the will of the board. I mean, we assume that it is because you never grant a variance without prohibiting roosters. But, and again, whatever variance you grant, is it possible to get a written variance? So we're on the same, we're not hearing them say, no, they never said that. Yes, they did say it. No, they didn't. You know, so we'd have just the, you know, when the zoning board grants a variance, they write it out. This would be much simpler than that. We just list the conditions.
Well, historically, Lisa is there. Maybe she can answer this. Mr. Casavant usually does those inspections. Usually at the board meeting, we would say, all right, the variance is granted pending these conditions. You will get a letter tomorrow or whatever, and you can pick up the permit at City Hall. And I just assumed that they get a letter with these conditions with the permit. Is that
Oh,
not
from us?
correct?
No, that seems not to happen. So that would be something that the inspector would record, whatever your conditions are.
Yes, usually Lisa Golden or Roger, we'd instruct them to, it's sort of, I would call it a letter with the conditions, and they could pick up the letter and the permit at Hall usually a couple of days after. I always thought that was procedure. Is it, we don't keep a copy of that for the file?
Well, I know we've had trouble finding them, if we did. So that might have been something that was sort of
Is
forgotten about
Lisa-
at some point.
You said Lisa was here.
She is, Lisa.
She clarify that? Is that possible? Lisa?
Lisa, you're on
Golden?
mute.
Lisa?
I think she's trying to figure out how to unmute herself.
She's headed to our excellent clip. Oh, no, she's not.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. No, we've never kept anything like that, on file. And I think partially because of the regulations, I think it's,
Lisa, can you try and speak a little bit closer to the microphone?
Okay.
At least I'm having a little bit of difficulty
Okay.
hearing you.
I don't think we keep anything like that on file, Tess. At least we haven't, you know. The regulations have, we've never really had to do that, you know, there's, you know, in my opinion, these regulations, they just definitely need to be changed, and there's just not, they're not, you know, some locations we go to, the properties are so clean that they don't need a ratification or anything like that. They don't need any kind of any kind of control. I mean, for instance, the location that had the conjugal visits, I mean, he had a little dollhouse for these special hens that he had, and it was immaculate. I mean, so somebody like that didn't really need anything like an extermination report or anything.
I think the benefit of potentially having a regulation would be that it would kind of create, you know, an even playing field for
Yeah.
all,
Right,
you
I
know,
agree. Yes,
residents, so that
everybody.
we make sure that no matter what, to kind of ease neighbors' concerns potentially with somebody having chickens, that everybody has the pest control.
Same, right.
Everybody has to potentially, you know, get a permit from the board, so that if there are these issues, that they can, you know, be addressed. So I think
No,
maybe we could
absolutely.
kind of think about this potentially, or the board could think about this in like a two ways to improve the process. So
Yeah.
the board could consider to at a future meeting, we'd have to have a public hearing about this, and then the board could look to, you know, vote on a regulation that, you know, could be similar to this. This was from the MAHB, the attorney for the Massachusetts Association of Health Boards. They have kind of these template documents, so we could utilize this and adjust as needed. But then I think also, in addition to that maybe we change the internal process from the Inspectional Services Division to, you know, print out, whether it's, you know, based on a variance or any other issues that come before the board, that you kind of summarize and sign that as any type of variance is approved, ensuring that, you know, they're meeting these mandates, as well as as having documented proof of pest control. I think that's written in this regulation that we would have to have, written proof of pest control, written proof from a landlord if the individual is not the property owner. So it kind of goes into a number of examples. And Faust, I know you said that it, in section 8 under penalties, part C, there is the first sentence does indicate any violation of this regulation shall be subject to fines.
Yeah.
I think we could specify, what the fine would be. And certainly the
Well,
board can consider that.
I think we'd have to. One
yeah,
thing you might want to consider is a graduated fine. And the benefit of that is, so the default fine on city ordinances, if there's no fine specified in an ordinance, there's a default fine, it's $300. I think there may be an advantage to considering something where it's a first offense, second offense, third offense, and you really have to sort of work your way up to $300. There are times when we'll get to a point. Now, a fine can be reduced during that hearing, that 40U hearing, but there seems to be a psychological advantage sometimes to having these where you're just sending a message, $50, and I'm just throwing numbers out again, and then if you really are not complying, because we've had people pay the fine but not correct the condition. When we're looking at trash and debris in yards or whatever we're looking at, they'll pay the fine, but they won't correct the condition. Of course, we're not really trying to get the fine, we're trying to get them to correct the condition. And I think that if you ratchet it up, you can say that first offense is not too onerous, if that's a concern. But you got to kind of, as a violator, you got to work kind of hard to get to a significant fine amount. That's just worth considering. That's something that litter control is considering bringing to the council. I think that it's a graduated fine. There's one other thing that when you said this, Tess, that I thought of. If this is going to increase, if the keeping of chickens is going to increase, this suggests that whenever and this would be like a lot of other licenses, whenever your license is at issue, it renews. They all renew in the same time. And what that does and that's, for businesses, liquor licenses, many other things, that kind of works. But if we get a bunch of them, I would suggest maybe a 1-year anniversary, only because I would think you'd want another inspection before you renew the license. And if they all expired at the same time, it might be a little bit difficult to get all those inspections in at the same time. In other words, this one says, and I know it's just a draft, at least 30 days prior to the expiration of the permit. A lot of them are going to be 30 days or 29 days or 31 days. And but then when they renew, it just seems like, since there's only space for one, this is on page 5 of this draft, for one date, it looks as though this is aiming towards everyone gets the same renewal date. So there are a couple of problems with that, I think, or potentially. It's a matter of opinion. What do you do if you're applying, if it's January 1st, what happens if you're applying on November 1st? Well, you're going to get the license, you get your license on November 1st. Well, you get your license, then 2 months later, you got to pay another $100 or whatever it is. But not only that, you have to go out and inspect all these places. I would think you'd want that. And that may be a time squeeze there, because sanitation inspectors have certain regularly scheduled inspections that may interfere with their ability to get everyone on board at the same time, in that period of time. Just a thought. But this is moving towards the point where, specific provisions in a variance may be rare, because if you're going to include all these, as you say, Tess, even the playing field, if you're going to, and then you're much more articulate than I, that's what I was trying to get at in a 15-minute speech. If we're evening the playing field, there may be very little that the board might be looking at numbers of chickens, on a case-by-case basis, but some of the need to spell things out for a specific variance may be obviated by the fact that if we do sort of put those provisions in the ordinance. Can I ask that question of the board? Do you look at the square footage and sometimes say, well, you folks can have 4 chickens, you folks can have 8 chickens? Does that happen, or on some other basis?
No, they usually come in with an amount of chickens they're requesting. It could be, I don't think we've ever gone over 10 or 12.
And your intention generally would have been to say, yes, you can have 12, but not more?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Well, they
And-
fill
and
out
we-
their own applications, so when they turn their paperwork in towards the end of the year, their applications have the amount that they're requesting.
Right,
Yeah.
but then on the other side, we need to know what's approved.
Right,
Because if that 12 turns into 24, and that's causing a complaint and we investigate. I mean, it's not that the complainants run the show here, the Board of Health runs the show, but we at least, it's sometimes difficult for us to know what we're doing.
we've been asked that question a few times of how many can I actually have? And there really has never been a set amount, at least as far as I don't know of any.
Well, again, if they don't come before the board and ask for a variance, if they have all the setbacks and everything, we've never set a limit.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Theoretically, if you have a big enough piece of land, you could have 100 chickens. As long as all the setbacks are met and the neighbors aren't complaining.
Sure, yeah, I get that. Although I have seen ordinances where there is a limit because it sort of changes from household animals to a farm.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's been a problem. I mean, we're not asking you to try to solve problems that don't exist, but this is just feedback we get from people that we're passing along.
Okay. I had a couple of other questions on this draft. Under number 6, the hearings, it kind of, when the letters went out in the past, did the city pay for the postage and everything? And did the department issue the letters to the abutters?
Yes.
Yes.
It's always-
Well, according to
yes.
this, we're going to depend upon the applicant to take care of those expenses and get the letters out. Is that very trustworthy? That was terrible, Tom.
Yeah, we have never, it's always been the city that's paid. In my time here, we just send out the letters and the applications, and
Mhm.
we do not include a second envelope, for them to return it back to us. But they usually, they send it back with their own postage. We don't pay for that.
Okay.
There's a way to do that, though, is there not? In that
There is. We can put an
the
extra
staff
envelope.
ensures that those letters go where they're supposed to go. But if you did have a $10 application fee to pay for that, so then the applicant is paying, but we're not depending on the applicant to do what needs to be done. I mean, in this ordinance, abutters are 300 feet. And that's pretty common, I think. A abutter isn't necessarily someone who shares a property line, it would be people across the street. And it has been at times unclear. I know people go to the assessor's office to find this out, unclear just what an abutter is. How far away is too far. We can find that out by looking at city maps, but is 2 doors down an abutter? Well, it might be depending on what you call an abutter, but a resident of the city might not really be able to determine that very well.
Okay. And the other question I had was under number 8, penalties D, arrangements for rehoming the animals shall accompany any suspension, revocation, or denial of a permit. Who's going to arrange the relocation of the animals?
Well,
It's
don't
sort of
think,
like when you condemn a property. It's different when the Board of Health condemns a property, and it's different when minimum housing condemns a property.
Right, and there is that issue. I don't think animal control, for instance, is capable of housing fowl.
Oh,
And
right,
and
I
that does happen
understand, but-
sometimes. We have to put, temporarily board a couple of dogs with minimum housing. I mean, with animal control, I don't think they actually house them. I think cats they can keep, but not dogs. I don't know if where they bring them somewhere. That
One,
is an
I'm
issue.
concerned- I'm just gonna, if they've got 24 chickens, do we have to rehouse them or?
No, I think they're trying to find a farming, in anywhere they can. I know they don't keep chickens there. They do keep cats and kittens.
Well, I think we have to tighten this line about whose responsibility it is to find that. At
Right,
whose
so if we're-
expense.
It's been suggested to us by complainants that we kidnap the chickens. Beyond the moral questions involved, there are practical concerns. You're absolutely right, Tom. That would be, well, here it is, suspend, so that would be temporary. Revoke or deny, and that's exactly what does come up. I think, though, that's where fines come in. And I will say this, that we issue quite a few fines. We don't collect many of them because, I shouldn't probably say this publicly, but we usually can work things out with the person that we've issued the fine to. Sometimes we have to get to that point and have a hearing and hash things out. And most of the fines are dismissed. So the inspectors themselves probably dismiss more than get to a hearing, and then the hearings obviously may. We're just trying to solve the problem. So we could put the onus on the owners of the chicken. So, but there would be penalties if they didn't get rid of those chickens. Then we're not
Okay,
physically, I mean, because we could have our own chicken farm. Theoretically. I mean, this is not exploding out of control, but it is more popular, And when you look at these, our experiences, when you look at these penalties, well, we want penalties. But that is really, they're attention getters. They make people understand that we're serious. It helps in negotiations. Many more fines are dismissed than are actually collected or enforced. So that may work. A financial penalty for not getting rid of the chickens. And then, you have your hearing with the 40U officer and you've gotten rid of the chickens. So they're not going to pay that fine.
mhm.
That's a possibility.
And I think we could
Okay.
include some language in, it would be at the homeowner's expense if we need to, find other arrangements for the chicken in terms of, removing it from a property that the board should probably consider putting language in there that it would be at the homeowner's expense to find.
Yes, it just, like I said, just to tighten up the
Yeah.
the regulation.
Sure.
Okay, that's all I had.
Hello.
I think that's all I have.
Hi, Dr. Gagliardi.
How you doing?
Okay, thanks for joining. We were just having a discussion about chickens and the need to update, potentially, or the board to consider updating existing regulations about having chickens on property.
What's the regulations now?
What was that? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
What kind of change did?
So right now, our regulation, it was a 2000 regulation that is kind of limited in its structure and really only requires somebody who is needs a variance, who wants to have chickens that's within 50 feet of another property line. Those are primarily the only folks that are coming before the board in terms of needing chickens and having us kind of aware of that. So the thought is that if we have more of a structured regulation that requires anybody who's interested in keeping chickens have a permit through the city, that would then be followed up by our inspectional services division in terms of inspections, that we would have more of a handle on the number of chickens and the opportunity to regulate any violations in terms of numbers of chickens, roosters, pest control issues, things of that nature. Faust, do you have, or Tom, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't.
No.
I think that, I've pretty much been able to spit out what our concerns are.
That seems pretty reasonable.
Yeah, I think as Faust and Lisa from Inspectional Services are on, and they have kind of seen an increase in complaints regarding some properties that have roosters, as well as an increased interest in the keeping of chickens. So
I mean, I thought about getting chickens, so I understand. My wife doesn't want them. But... So, I mean, how often would they be inspected? Would it be once a year or every couple of years? Or...
We periodically check the properties. We do at the end of the year before their new license is issued. And I stop in a couple of times throughout the year just to make sure the properties are also clean.
Yeah. Okay.
And so what the next steps would be if the board is interested in considering, updating the regulation, which it sounds like there's a potential there, is that we would have to have a public hearing about this. And, I think we should maintain our virtual meeting. So I'd have to just look into how we would be able to get citizen input in terms of, making their voices heard, and then the board could look to adopt or update or pass a regulation that's potentially similar to the one that we had sent out with the meeting agenda based on.
All right. That sounds good. As long as the people are able to join in virtually, that's your.
Yeah, we would be able to have folks either join virtually or provide comment prior to the meeting that we would be able to read at the meeting.
All right. Sounds good to me.
Okay, so Tess, you're going to investigate this further and give us a draft for the next meeting?
Yes, I will do that. And if I'm able to kind of revise the regulation based on the discussion that we've had today, would that be an opportunity to then move forward for our next meeting to hold a public hearing? I just want to make sure that if we want to move forward on a public hearing potentially at our next meeting, that I do what we need to do in terms of notification.
Yeah,
I think I'd like to see it first, and then we can discuss it at a meeting and then a public hearing on it.
Okay, very good.
All right.
Okay, the next item is a COVID-19 update. I assume Tess, you're going to be giving us that.
Yes, I will be. And Faust and Lisa, you're certainly welcome to stay on and listen, but definitely no need to if you're looking to
I
head
actually
out.
have another hearing.
Okay,
All right. So thank you all for your time.
thank you.
Thank you, Faust.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so as it stands, and I was trying to pull a report today, and then it didn't save properly, so I have to go on based on my last report that I pulled, which was October 20th. The cases as of today, and Kathy, you might have a better sense of those numbers. Do you know what our case count was prior to the meeting? Let me just pop my head out. Hold on one second.
Yeah, I didn't do I think Maria did it today.
Oh, I hit home.
Sorry about that. We have it written on our board. So, actually, I'm gonna go based on yesterday, because that number doesn't make sense.
Says leave. Yeah. Well, it didn't say
Apologize.
Leave. Leave.
Let's see. In the meantime, sorry. Let's see, this is actually as of the 2nd. So we had 2,789 COVID positive patients. That's for the duration of the pandemic. So that, really starts back. We pulled a report based on January 1. As of October 20th, predominantly our case counts were 57.9% of our cases were female. 41.3% of our cases are male. The age range that has the highest percentages is the 40 to 39 age range. That's about that range is increasing. So the 40 to 69 age range, those numbers have been going up steadily. But the 30 to 39 age group, that's 18.13% of our case counts. And in that 30 to 39 age group, really, we're not alone in having that be kind of our age bracket that's having more case counts. That's really across the Commonwealth. Folks in cities similar to ours are seeing cases rise in that age group. A lot of our cases are, and again, this is similar to other communities as well. Sorry about that. We are seeing cases stemming from household gatherings. So that's not only kind of larger events, but also small dinner parties, small events where people think that their friends and family are safe and that they can see them without wearing a mask, without maintaining distance. Yet we are seeing our cases there. That household issue is also when folks aren't truly able to isolate within the home, and that slowly the other family members convert to positive because they have, they're in a small dwelling, or they don't have access to, multiple bathrooms, things like that. So those are kind of really where we're seeing our cases. And again, that's not just us, that is kind of the trend statewide, that these gatherings are drivers for transmission. Now, Governor Baker has made the announcements about the new orders that go into effect on Friday, so that's tomorrow. 12:01, there's a new gathering order, a new mask order, as well as the 9:30 restrictions for businesses. So would it be beneficial for me to kind of break those down in terms of what the orders are?
No,
For
probably
anybody?
not necessary. We're pretty much aware.
Okay. In terms of enforcement, generally speaking, our team within inspectional services is out in the community at all hours of the day, following up on complaints, issues that are coming up. Kathy here, who's on the Zoom, is answering our phone, which is ringing off the hook, as well as our health department email with complaints that people are seeing. So our inspectional services division has been and is continuing to go out to address those issues. There have been limited circumstances where fines have been brought down on businesses, but for the most part, people and businesses are doing what they can within the guidelines to ensure that, you know, they're taking the protocol seriously. That will also be, you know, more impact for them will be this 9:30 restriction. A big piece of it is education. You know, people, and the fatigue is real. People are tired, but we're, you know, trying to continue our messaging. I am trying to work with the Chamber South Coast Chamber to kind of get more messaging out to businesses. Another kind of bucket that's not the, you know, that we're having issues with is when employees are reporting to work symptomatic. So we're continue to try and educate businesses and residents that they must stay home when they're feeling ill and to take advantage of the Stop the Spread sites. I'm going to be putting more signage throughout the city, kind of at high traffic areas with these sandwich boards that the Department of Community Maintenance utilizes for recycling and things like that. So messaging is going to be going out and being placed around the city. Those will be put out every day and then taken in at nighttime. But those are, you know, I'm working on that and going to talk to a print shop tomorrow to kind of get those drafted. I am continuing to try and go on the radio, have press conferences with the mayor to educate folks and try and shift and encourage individuals to rethink holiday gatherings. You know, as we will be in the red per the state database again today based on our case counts. So, you know, going into the holiday season with these increased cases is of a concern. So we really need to encourage our residents to shift their mindset and take the precautions seriously, take the new mask order seriously, and the gathering order, because that indoor gathering order for private homes is different than public spaces. Public spaces, it's 25. Private homes, it's a limit of 10 people within your home. Does anybody have any, you know, questions specifically, or areas you'd like to address, or me to, you know, prioritize?
No, I just have one question on the public gatherings. I got a call from my pastor earlier today. Does that count the churches who are at 40% capacity?
So churches, that capacity remains, the church capacity remains. However, any type of basement or other, you know, function space, that's limited to 10.
Okay,
But the overall, you know, the church places of worship continue to have those different standards in terms of capacity.
Every church is a big cathedral, though.
There are some churches that are like in strip malls. It's like a one room.
So that you know, that would, I guess, if there's only one room, then that would be 40% capacity. Or I can pull up the reg. I think it's, I'll have to.
yeah,
wanna
churches are
it's
at
usually-
40% of their building permit capacity.
Yeah. Or, and if there's no permitted building permit, then it's usually like 10 persons per 1,000 square feet. But I can try and get that regulation up. Does anybody else have any other questions or concerns while I try and find this?
Well, the case counts might be going up. How are hospitalizations and deaths? I mean, at the hospital, I'm not seeing a whole lot of increase in activity out there.
Yeah, so it sounds like when I've touched base with some of the hospitals, you know, St. Anne's is still working with Morton and the Kearney, I believe, and Charlton does have some COVID positive patients, there. I think, as the cases go up, we can anticipate that some of those high risk individuals will be hospitalized. I am starting, and Dr. Gagliardi, I know you had been on some of my calls. I am starting up those hospital calls, so I'll send you a link for our internal group for twice a month at this point in time, meeting with our hospital teams. So you can look for that. And Tom and Stephanie, if you're interested in that as well, I can certainly send you the dial-in information. Those are going to be on Wednesdays as of now for at 9:30 in the morning.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. Also be interested, Tess.
Okay. And I'm just getting let's see. Yeah, buildings with it was the 10 persons, including staff, per 1,000 feet of accessible space. So if it looks like Dr. Gagliardi dropped off, but for any venue that doesn't have a place of worship that doesn't have a building permit on file, it would be that 10 persons per 1,000 square feet. But it does indicate that, and this is new, and that's why I noticed they just added it in terms of that 10 persons in a basement or another function space. Yeah, in any case, no enclosed space, a single room basement within the building may exceed occupancy of 10 persons per 1,000 square feet. So it does actually indicate that 10,000 square feet. But that's new language that they just added to that places of worship guidance. And I'm continuing to be on the bi-weekly calls with the local health departments, as well as I have in calls with other health directors on a regular basis, at least on a weekly basis. We do a gateway cities or a large cities call with other health directors, so I kind of have a sense of what other communities are doing. But oftentimes it does kind of show itself that we're all struggling with the same issues.
Tess, I have one concern. So I was just by happenstance at one of the testing sites that we have set up. So the Seven Hills testing sites. I think it was Tuesdays and Thursdays, maybe from 11 to 2. So there must have been, when 11 o'clock hit, they just told everybody to get out of their cars. There was probably 120 people standing in line within a foot, maybe 6 inches of each other, waiting to be tested. And to me, it was just kind of a contradiction to what we're trying to do here and what we're trying to get across.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's,
It was outside. So they were standing outside. So obviously decreases the risk, but they were in a line just like you would be before COVID.
Okay. Yeah, we certainly want to make sure that, across the board, no matter what type of line anybody is in, whether it's at the grocery store or at a testing site, that we're all following the guidance and the protocols. So I will follow up on that.
I know other facilities, you're staying in your car. That's what my assumption was, that everyone would be in their car and the testing would come to the car, but it wasn't that way. It was just really taken back.
Okay. Yeah. Seven Hills has been doing, a walk up and not just a drive-in.
Yeah.
But I'll speak with the team there.
So my lab is going to be up and running in a few weeks. I have a Cepheid machine and 2, that's the PCR, and I have 2 BD Veritors, which are the rapids. I got my allotment for tests, but I'm really doing mostly my own patients because I'll have a 1-hour turnaround. Any excess, if you need a quick test, you don't want to wait a couple of days or something like that, I'll be able to do it. Because I can get a PCR test done in an hour. but I
Okay.
only have about 50 kits a month
Mm-hmm.
on my
Yeah.
on my allocation. So I'll be doing that for all my own pre-ops and my patients, and maybe some of the other stuff for the surgery center, things like that, where they need something quick for surgery, but we'll have it available.
Okay. Yeah, we're fortunate, in Fall River that there is access to the Stop the Spread sites, and we want to continue to encourage anybody who's been near somebody who's a COVID patient or been around a COVID positive patient, or is a contact or has any symptoms or is just worried that everybody should get a test if they feel as though they need a test or have been around somebody who's positive or been around a large gathering. I think as we again move into the holidays, I think people are gonna consider that if they get a test, that they can see family, and while that's important, it's also, as we've seen, if you get a test on a Monday, that doesn't mean that you'll be negative on a Thursday. So making sure that people are aware that a negative test really doesn't mean that you should carry on as you were prior to COVID. That it's still important to maintain distance and wear your masks and stay outdoors as much as possible, or even at a minimum, open the windows if you're, in a home, things like that.
Now, say if someone wants to travel and they want to get a test or they need a test to travel, does insurance cover that, or is that part of the free testing, or do they have to kind of pay for that themselves?
For the
So there's no-
Stop the Spread sites, it's entirely free. I don't know actually if you go to a CVS or a pharmacy, or Tom, maybe you would know this, that if you get a test and you don't have symptoms, if that is free at a private organization.
That I don't know. I'm sure they're taking billing information, but I'm not sure. I haven't heard either way.
All right, I can find out.
And within the schools, we haven't seen a lot of community spread in the schools. We are, really busy with the schools and working with the nurses within, the school, public school department, as well as the charter and private schools. So the schools alone are keeping us quite busy. But, we mainly are having issues of contacts and fewer confirmed cases.
So when we first started talking about the kids going back to school, the initial plan was to do the hybrid, and then in November, kind of relook at it. And if the cases aren't going up in the schools, what's the thought on that? Are they going to keep it hybrid or go 100% in person?
My latest, indications from Dr. Malone, the superintendent, would be that that it sounds to me like they're remaining kind of where we're at. I think there's going to be a reevaluation based on our case counts, but I should I can, for our next meeting, get a full update from Dr. Malone to try and present information to you based on his. I shouldn't speak for him. So either I can try and see if he would be able and willing to join our meeting for next go around, or I can work with him to get any update from him prior to the meeting that I could share based on his behalf.
Because it does create a hardship. We lost a couple of girls, had to quit their jobs because the kids were not able to, be in school. So it's a real thing.
Yeah, I think that, the based on kind of what my understanding is, that the different cohorts allow for distance, proper 6 feet to be maintained between each student. I think if there was kind of a full in-person classroom, that distance would have to shrink to accommodate, everyone. So, I think it's great that the Fall River Public Schools is really doing all that they can and really working hard to keep the students safe. Does anybody else have
Okay.
any other? Oh, go ahead, Tom.
No, just, anyone else have any questions on this issue? Hearing none, seeing none. Is there any new business to come before the board? It was of such a nature that it could not make the agenda.
No new business, Tom.
Okay, did
I'm
anything
good.
come in on citizens input time?
No.
I know when the agenda was posted, there was directions there if anyone had anything. Do you know if anything came in?
No, we didn't have any emails.
Okay. We got to confirm the date for the next meeting. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 o'clock-ish? Do we need one in December?
I know usually we take I guess if we could put one in early December to kind of go over the potential reg, I think maybe that would be beneficial. If we could do something, before kind of the holiday season picks up.
That would be fine. We have on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have the 1st and the 3rd of the 8th of the 10th. That would be early enough in the month. Anyone have a pleasure?
Well, that's good for me.
I'm open.
Stephanie, how's that? You're
I'm
open, Stephanie? How's it look for you?
I'm open.
You want to go with Thursday the 3rd?
Sounds good
Is that
to
enough
me.
time?
Yep.
Okay, we'll go with Thursday, December 3rd, 4 o'clock on a virtual.
Yeah, I think for the time being, we should hold all of our meetings virtually,
Okay.
All right.
lead by example.
So can you send that out to me? So I don't forget.
Yeah, I can send out, or Kathy, or I can send out a calendar invitation.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
I
We have a
second.
second.
I
All in
second.
favor, say aye.
All right.
Opposed? So voted. Listen, thank you all for your time this afternoon. Go out there, wear your mask, stay safe, socially distance.
All right, thanks.
Thank
Great,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.